Yeah, I'm going to be talking to you on music and AI. So I've had the amazing privilege of having two careers running parallel. So one in the music industry and one in software development, and had the opportunity to work on a lot of projects where those two combine. And the really fascinating thing about music is that music and AI or music and algorithms have never really been that far away from one another. They've actually always been quite close to one another. Ever since we've had composers and music theorists, we've been thinking very systematically about music, the rules, the guidelines for music composition, whether that be for Formenlehre, so, the structure of a composition, or like Stimmführung, like the voice leading, or it could be anything. So there's lots and lots of different ways in which music throughout history has been treated almost algorithmically in very systematic sorts of ways. So there's a very long history of algorithms of music, and I thought that it might be nice to start off showing you some programs that use algorithms. And most of the programs that I'm going to be showing you today are programs that you can try out for yourself at home, and they're free to try out as well. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is a program called Kati. There it is. This is a machine I built together with the University of Musik Weimar many years ago, and it's a Kantionalsatzmaschine. So if you don't know what a Kantionalsatz or what Kantionalsatz is, don't worry. It's a very niche area of music theory, and it's all got to do with four-part harmony, so four-part voice leading. And essentially, all we did for this project is we took a book. This is it, by the music theorist Thomas Daniel. So he wrote this big, fat book on Kantionalsatz im 16. und 17. Jahrhundert, where he goes through and he essentially lays out all of the rules, all of the systems, all of the voice leading as a series of tables, like Tafeln. So he goes through all of these rules really, really systematically. And so we decided, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we just took this book and turned it into a program, essentially? And so that's what we did. And that's exactly what Kati does. So what I'll do is I'm going to chuck a quick example in the machine. So this is the melody I'm going to feed the machine. But what we can do, and again, you can try this out for yourself if you want. So digitale Musiktheorie.de. If we choose the file, we can then harmonize the file. And there we go. We can then download the file. And we should be able to open that up. There it is. It harmonizes it in this really strict sort of style, according to Kantionalsatz. So it's very correct, very systematic. It's not brilliant music, but it's correct. And again, the entire point of this system, and the fascinating thing about this system, was to show or to see, that a lot of these historical genres are extraordinarily algorithmic. Like, the amazing thing about Kati is that, the algorithm itself, the logic behind it itself, is historical. It's old, The fact that we have computers now allows us to take that to the nth degree and do some really amazing things. But, the logic behind this itself, very, very old, right? But a system like this then leads you to question, okay, how far can you then take that? So here we have an extraordinarily strict system of rules. Is it possible to come up with algorithms that are much more flexible, that maybe have less rules, which can do more things or produce more organic, sort of more human, more expressive sorts of content? So next thing I'm going to show you is this. So this is an algorithm called the Boyd's algorithm. This is from the 1980s, and there's quite a few of these sorts of algorithms around from, the 70s, the 80s, 90s, and this sort of thing, that are based off of very few rules. Another example that's very well known is Conway's Game of Life, if anyone's ever heard of Conway's Game of Life. And the incredible thing about the Boyd's algorithm is that there's literally just three rules. So each of these birds flying around on the screen, essentially, they're trying to fly towards the middle of the group. They're also trying to match the speed of the other birds, but at the same time, they're trying to avoid colliding with the other birds. And it's incredible because you put in these 3 rules into the system and you get these beautiful organic sorts of behaviors coming out that looks like flocks of birds or swarms of insects or schools of fish. And this has serious musical potential. So you can imagine, okay, what if we treated every single bird like its own musical voice, its own musical instrument, right? So the reason this becomes musically interesting is because this is running in 3 dimensions. We've got a y-axis, an x-axis, and we've also got a z-axis, that is to say depth. Music can also be distilled into different dimensions. So we have dynamics, we've got pitch, we've got duration, we've got sound color, articulation. There's all sorts of different ways that you can divide it down into individual components. And then you can start to pair all of those different components with components from these simpler algorithms. So what I'm going to show you now is one of the first publicly available programs that I ever released. Here we go. It's a program called Boyd's Composer. Oh, goodness. Can you hear it? Lovely. What I've done is I've coupled each of our flying objects with the different dimensions from the Boyd's algorithm. So you'll see that when they fly higher, their pitches will also get higher. On the z-axis, that is to say the depth, we have dynamics. So when the Boyds fly further away, they get quieter, and when they come closer, they get louder. The x-axis is then for our harmonies. So you'll see that there's a little ball flying around on the screen, and this is the average position of all of our flying objects, and this is what we can use to trigger your harmonic progressions. So at the moment, everything's just in C major, so that's all you hear. You just hear the pitches of C major chord. But if I put something different into one of these chord groups, and let's say D, G, D, A, dominant 7. So when we fly over the chord group, you should be able to hear the content of that group. So I'll let you play around with that yourself, but very, very simple rules. But this system is capable of suddenly being able to produce quite organic, quite human, very interesting sorts of generations. It's also a lovely sort of interactive system. It's you have that lovely ping pong effect between you and the machine, this backwards and forwards. So it's a lovely creative little tool, and it shows that we should never poo-poo algorithms these days. Just because we have neural networks doesn't necessarily mean that these traditional sorts of algorithms don't have use cases anymore. But this then leads us to ask additional questions. What else can we do potentially with these sorts of algorithms, and what can we then, or how can we then enhance them when it comes to AI? By the way, if you're interested, so this is Swansonic. So this is my company. This is the platform I'm slowly building. We're just getting started out. You will gradually see more programs being added to this. So they might be AI programs, they might be algorithms, they might be computer games, they might just be interesting educational resources. The goal of Swansonic is to build tools that just intrigue people about music, that people just find interesting. And if you want to look more into algorithmic composition, I've got some material on my YouTube channel. So it's called Score Circuit. For example, Conway's Game of Life and Music. It goes more into depth into algorithmic approaches to music. I've got one on Mozart's AI, Mozart and algorithms, or CPU Bach. It's a video game that composes the music of Bach. So feel free to check that out if you're interested in those sorts of things. But the next program I'm going to show you, again, you can also try it out for free if you want, if you sign up to Swansonic, is ChordPen. So ChordPen is a chord progression generator, and it's a neural network. It's based off of a transformer architecture. So for those who don't know what a transformer is, the transformer is essentially one of the most popular architectures these days for neural networks. That's what we find behind, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini, whatever, any large language model. And you can immediately see one of the benefits of working with a neural network over an algorithm is they're so much more flexible. I can choose all sorts of different genres all of a sudden. I'm not like Carty, where you can only do one very specific thing. Like here, I can say Asian pop, Pinoy pop. Don't know if anyone knows what Pinoy pop is. This is pop music from the Philippines. Yeah. So we can generate something in this style. Yeah, and every time I click generate, it'll produce something completely different, right? Now, what this system essentially does is it generates just a chord progression as a string of text, similar to the way in which you would generate, regular text in a language model, right? So whenever you've got a language model, you just put in regular text and it spits out regular text, right? So, text in, text out. The fascinating thing, of course, about neural networks is that if you swap out the data that you give them, you get different data out again. So what we've done is we've, taken a transformer and trained it from scratch on just chord progressions. So with this particular system, you generate your chord progression as text, and then the front end essentially just passes that information and converts that information into, a sort of form in which you can play around with or edit or manipulate and then play back. But the playback itself is the Boyd's algorithm. Because algorithms have other advantages. For example, they're computationally cheap, right? So you don't need a heavy-duty GPU to run all of your computation off. A lot of really powerful systems are often a combination of a traditional sort of approach and a new approach. But the fascinating thing with working with neural networks is that you then begin to ask the question, okay, if we can do something like this, how can you then take that to the next level? Is it possible to produce more complex forms of music? So this would then lead me into Quill. This is another program I developed together with the university in Weimar. And Quill is another historical music generator. So we trained it on 6,000 pieces of music, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually not that much for a neural network. In fact, the fact that we can get decent quality out of this after only training it on 6,000 pieces of music is pretty incredible, because usually you train them on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of pieces of data, right? So I'm just going to quickly generate something style of Mozart. Yeah. Etc. So every time I click generate, we should get something completely different out of this. This is also a problem with neural networks. Like, you never know what they're going to do. They kind of have a bit of a mind of their own. They'll do something completely different every single time. And part of the purpose of this machine is to get people more musically involved in, classical music. So to get people wondering, oh, what on earth is Scarlatti? Maybe I should go and look at the original Scarlatti on the internet. And, so one of the main purposes of this sort of software is essentially for pedagogical purposes, music education. This particular model, these sorts of models start to get a little bit more complex when it comes to feeding a neural network. So what's happened is a little bit of a shift when it comes to music generation or music AI. So back in the old days, if you built a system, you would have to understand the rules of music theory, right? You would have to understand how music works. And these days, with a system like this, you don't necessarily have to know or understand all of that anymore. Like, you don't really necessarily have to understand music theory in order to be able to train a neural network, because the neural network kind of learns itself from the data. However, there are other challenges. For example, one of the biggest challenges is working out how to tokenize your data. So this is quite complex information. You've got to work out, okay, how do you actually give that to a neural network? Like, how do you convert all of that information to just numbers? So yeah, that would be one of the biggest challenges here. And another challenge, of course, is performance. And this is one of the most critical, almost painful points of generative AI these days, especially in the creative space. Um, I was talking to my boss when we were building this thing, telling him about all of the different updates I would like to make and how we would like to improve it and increase the data set. And he reached a point where he said, but we don't want it to get too good, because if it gets too good, it actually loses its pedagogical purpose, right? So there's this weird sense in which if a machine which generates art gets too good, it kind of does everything and you don't need a person anymore. And all of a sudden it becomes useless. Like, why would you even need that? But at the same time, if it's not good enough, no one's going to care. No one's going to use it. So the question is, well, is there like a small slither of space in between those two extremes where you can say, all right, it's good enough, but probably shouldn't be better? I don't know. It's a really weird sort of place that you find yourself in this sort of environment and in generative AI in general. And this is something that we've been finding out the hard way, that yes, it's cool making these machines, but the question is, well, what is their purpose at the end of the day? So that's cool. But this sort of music then leads you to another question, and that would be, well, if you can generate something like this, is it possible to generate something bigger? Could you generate orchestral music? So I'm not sure how this is going to go, but if I, can you guys see that? The purple background? Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. Good, you can see it. So this is from a system called Swansonic. And I can't let you play around with this one. It's not online yet. Halfway through 2023, I had an accidental breakthrough where I was playing around with some architectures that you wouldn't normally use for this sort of music generation. And I decided, well, maybe we can feed it orchestral scores. So I quickly gathered a couple of Beethoven symphonies and threw it into this machine. And lo and behold, the machine started to spit out orchestral scores in the style of Beethoven. Like a little bit unrefined, but nevertheless, it was doing a pretty good job. And so we decided to build out a proper prototype, right? So we built out this prototype and we gathered 200 scores, 200 orchestral scores, and we cleaned them painstakingly by hand. We labeled them all by hand. I cleaned them all myself by hand. Really painful, really time consuming. And then we fed all of these scores to the machine, and it started to produce things like, what would be a nice one? Well, let's start with this one, like this. It's all right. It's got flaws. It's not perfect yet. Maybe I can play you something else. The cool thing is that you can kind of describe the music you want to it. You can say, okay, I want it to be sad or angry, aggressive, chaotic, happy, joyful. Yeah. Again, you can see there's a lot of flaws, a lot of stuff that we can probably just remove algorithmically as well. Like there's a lot of ways in which it can still be cleaned up. It still makes mistakes, but nevertheless, it's pretty decent given that we're working with a prototype. And again, 200 scores. Like we're talking about machines that usually require hundreds of thousands of data points, right? We've only got 200 scores. So the fact that we're getting results like this off of that is pretty phenomenal. And in addition to that, what we then discovered is that this system is incredibly flexible. So Swansonic isn't very good at creating motifs or melodies. Actually, it's terrible at creating its own motifs and melodies. It's very good at color, working with like orchestration. And so what's cool about this system is that it can actually take melodies or bass lines or chord progressions or whatever you want. It can take pre-existing musical material and orchestrate it, right? Which makes it kind of crazy powerful. So, as an example, I'm going to show you what happened when we put this into the machine. So this is just a piano piece by Schubert. Etc. So what we did is we gave that to Swansonic and we said, okay, take this material and make it aggressive, powerful, massive. Yeah? This is what came out. So on and so forth. It goes on for a while, right? So this is all well and good, but there's kind of a problem with all of this. And it's a pretty significant problem. And this is where things get really, really weird. Because the question then becomes like, why do you even need something like this? This is still just a prototype, and we could theoretically build it out. But something weird has happened in the world of generative AI, and I think we're all sort of aware of it. So in my mind, 2022 is going to mark a significant line in the sand in regards to generative AI. So before 2022, most people developing AI were hobbyists. They were, researchers. They were experimentalists, artists like myself, entrepreneurs. There were very few businesses that were trying to make a serious income off of generative AI. And then, of course, in 2022, we had the first serious improvements in regards to diffusion models. So that is to say your image generators got really good. We then, at the end of 2022, have ChatGPT being released, so GPT 3.5, and the really big improvements in regards to human feedback reinforcement learning. And then, at the beginning of 2023, you have a paper being released called Musik LM. And Musik LM is essentially a milestone in regards to audio generation, where they started generating really fantastic audio files, again, off of a pretty small data set. And we obviously know what happened after that. 2023, there were just startups, new AI startups all over the place. The entire industry just changed practically overnight. And so we see that, again, practically overnight, generative AI goes from being this really niche sort of small field, research field, to be big business. It becomes horrendously corporatized. And the question then becomes like, all right, what are we doing exactly? Is this really all such a good idea? And a program like Swansonic is kind of representative of all of that, because we've now worked out how to generate an awful amount of things. These days with audio, I don't know if you've heard of Suno or Udio. You can generate the most incredible audio files, or with the image generators these days, or text generators. There are still limitations to what you can generate, but we've opened up the floodgates. And so it's no longer a question necessarily as to, well, what can we generate, but what should we generate? And to me, as someone from the music industry, I see a program like this and I think, well, at the end of the day, if this is successful and takes off and people are using it, it's only really going to be used primarily to generate AI slop, right? And put more pressure on the music industry. And so I've actually decided, well, as cool as this project is, I'm actually going to shoot it. I'm going to kill it. And that's why I'm not releasing it. So I'm not going to release the code. I decided I'm not going to write a paper on how we did it. I'm not even going to release the data set just because it's not helpful to human beings. Like I think this technology, I personally believe this technology has its limitations. And I think it has a lot of potential when it comes to pedagogy, when it comes to education. But there's no reason why we should be getting machines to generate art. Like, how dystopian is that? Like, if you told us 15 years ago that the robots were creating all of the art, like, we would have thought you were crazy, right? And we're all kind of sitting back and saying, yeah, this is totally normal, you know? So, yeah, there's a lot of conflicts for people like me in this industry because if you come from the old world of generative AI, you kind of look at what's going on now and you think, what do we do with all of this? So, what we're trying to do now with Swansonic is find ways of using this knowledge and this technology in ways that's really going to encourage musicians and encourage hobbyists, get people more involved in art because at the end of the day, music is there for us, for our humanity. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm really curious to see what some of you say on this topic, and I'd be interested in entering into some discussions. So, I mean, I'm happy to leave it there for the moment.